Hi, folks. Today we have a special guest from VMware, and we're going to talk about what VMware is doing in multi-cloud sphere and cross-cloud, what they call it, and in cloud in general. We have Betty Junod with us. Betty, thanks for being here. It was
Thank
great
you.
to see you at KubeCon in Detroit a couple of weeks back. And after that, you went to VMware Explore Europe, EU, in Barcelona. Welcome. Give a brief introduction and then tell us about what happened at EU VMware Explore in brief, and we can go from there.
Great. Thanks, Sarbjeet. So nice to chat with you again. Yeah, so it was, it's so fun to have this chat because we've been longtime Twitter followers of each other. And it was so nice to meet you in person in Detroit. And then, yeah, like just last week, I was in Barcelona for VMware Explore. And the last time I was in Barcelona was actually for KubeCon EU. So it was really fun to be back at the FIRA, really energizing to go back in person to many of these events, see the community, talk to folks interested in the same topics, Kubernetes, cloud. I'm still dealing with a little bit of jet lag, but all in all, pretty good. So I'm Betty, and for those of you watching right now, I'm VP of Product Marketing here at VMware, looking after the Tanzu business, so our cloud native applications side of the portfolio.
Great. So, how different was the VMware Explore in Europe? Some of us, comparing notes offline to Twitter DMs and all that, actually, including myself, thought that you guys just did an event in US, and then it's like there were a lot of buzz around the European event as well. Did you guys announce new services and or features to the existing services? What were those? And if you can wrap up what you guys announced in US as well at high level for our audience, and that would be great because it's a fact, I think, that the Tanzu, the umbrella sort of product family you have guys have launched in within last couple of years, you have start to talk about that. People are a little confused about what's under that umbrella, and we'll dig deeper into that a little bit. But just let's talk about the announcements from Europe and then the key announcement from US.
Yeah, so let's see, the US was very end of August. I went back to kind of when we would originally have that VMworld timing, right? This year we rebranded it to Explore, part of like expanding the universe, right? Beyond VMware is more than just a virtualization company. Tanzu is one of the areas in which we're expanding beyond, the virtualization business. In San Francisco, we made announcements across the entire Tanzu portfolio. Tanzu application platform, we announced version 1.3. We GA'd that later in the quarter. And that was really advancing. We had a security dashboard, additional security scanning integrations, API catalog as part of the developer portal. So those are kind of the big announcements there. On the Tanzu for Kubernetes operations side, we had a lot of news related to Tanzu Mission Control. So that's the Kubernetes cluster manager. So the Kubernetes environment control plane. We had tech preview of full lifecycle for EKS, GitOps support with Flux, and there's a few other things there, but really advancing on the management of the Kubernetes environments. And then in Europe, what we did is, there's a number of announcements there, specifically anchoring to like, how do we improve the developer experience as well as the operator experience? But specifically for the European audience, we had announcements related to bringing like Tanzu Mission Control on-premise. It's currently a SaaS solution, but there's a number of our customers that do need to run things in air-gapped environments as we go to like Europe, specifically running things in sovereign clouds, keeping the metadata and the environments within the borders are really important. So bringing mission control on-prem, taking our Tanzu services to sovereign cloud, So the Tanzu application platform, as well as mission control and the Kubernetes grid and our data services in a sovereign cloud environment. That was kind of a big aspect there. We advanced the service mesh capabilities, so doing automatic discovery and onboarding of Kubernetes clusters, support for GitOps as part of that environment as well. And then lastly, we have we announced the beta of Image Builder. So the engine behind what we do on the Bitnami side. So the ability to automate the packaging, verification, and distribution of all these artifacts. We've taken it out and made it available to end users. So before you before you decide what your teams are going to build with, right? There's open source packages, libraries, and third-party ISV solutions. A lot of times companies take those components and then package it to their golden OS images, right? Their corporate standard settings. We're now, by taking that functionality, making available to customers, we're helping them automate that lifecycle management for these components that they want to have in their own kind of inner loop and supply chains.
Yeah, the software supply chain has been a hot issue.
Yeah.
Hot topic, you can say, an issue as well, because after the Log4j sort of debacle on the security side, where the software comes from and who cooks it up, and are you keeping it up to date? It's a big mess, actually, especially if you mix the open source with the sort of vendor provided software, you mix it up, it becomes really convoluted. And any vendors actually which are trying to sort of streamline that for their customer base, I think it goes a long way. Google is trying to do similar efforts there. I bet AWS will announce that in a couple of weeks as well, that they are trying to do that as well, and so is Azure and everybody else. That's good. And you just mentioned one thing in the last segment, that you're launching the on-prem sort of capability of Tanzu. There's a sort of myth out there, I think. I mean, I am actually a little bit confused as well, to be honest with you. Are there any services Tanzu services which work only with public cloud providers and not in your data center at this point? If there are they documented, well documented, or what's the delta if somebody wants to bring the workload from cloud to on-prem, what do they have to lose? Actually, that's the main question, I think.
Yeah, I think, one of the design philosophies for Tanzu is any Kubernetes, any cloud. In that sense, whether it's running on its AWS or it's in a private data center, we see those as any cloud that the customer chooses that they need to be. Many of our existing enterprise customers are hybrid in some form, depending on the country they're operating in, et cetera. And when we say any Kubernetes, it could be the Tanzu Kubernetes grid, the runtime we have, or it could be, EKS. It could be, honestly, even some customers like OpenShift, right? We're focusing on the developer productivity, the supply chain, and the management layer across these environments, and not so much on exactly where that workload is running, what Kubernetes distro it's running on. We believe the important stuff is the policies, configurations, and the automation at the layer above that, because if you're a big company, right, you will have hundreds of applications. Each one of those applications teams may be running it in a slightly different place, right? And so that part is kind of like it doesn't matter. We should let those teams pick where they want to run that app, where they want to build to, because maybe they want to use some other services from that cloud provider as part of building that app. So we want to focus on the layer above. The part about taking Tanzu Mission Control on-prem is really that some parts of what we have within the Tanzu portfolio is actually installed software, and some of the parts components are actually SaaS services. like the observability functionality is a SaaS service, mission control, the cluster control plane is a SaaS service. Because we work with a lot of, large enterprise customers, many in highly regulated industries or multinationals, their ask to us is, please provide some of this functionality on-prem, because we actually cannot have even any of the metadata residing in some sort of SaaS service. We need to keep all of that within our network, within our firewall.
Yeah, I think the on-prem presence of cloud, in this case, private cloud, that will be, I will call it, even though it's priced as public cloud, right? And some part of that is SaaS. Even I think that what you install there is priced as cloud, like pay per use kind of stuff, right? So we'll come to the pricing in a bit. So I think in Europe it will work better, because Europe has been trying to build their public cloud presence for a while. There were quite a few efforts in the last about 6-7 years, and every time they get some traction, and then it kind of just flatters, it just doesn't take off. I think they will appreciate these services more because of the data sovereignty issues. And of course, like Europe is a set of so many countries put together, and their size and economy-wise, it's equal to US alone. US is a big country. It's one economy versus multiple economies, multiple jurisdictions and laws. Even though EU has their own, but then some countries in Europe are not part of EU. UK is not, and a few others are not. So yeah, I think it's a good move from you guys, and that you guys launched those capabilities over there to create a buzz, I guess. That's good. The one question, I think we have covered it to a certain extent, but maybe double clicking on that a little bit more. What are the components of Tanzu? That's another confusing part for a lot of people who are very familiar. I think almost everybody in the enterprise tech, in the brownfields, companies which are not like 5 years or younger, they know VMware stack, right? So vSphere, virtualization, and vCloud Director, and all these services. And VMware acquired so many companies in application performance arena and visibility into the sort of network and security and everything. Keeping all that in mind, what are the services cooked up from scratch actually for Tanzu, let's say? What are the recent sort of developments versus what's being recycled, you can say, or taken from the old stack and put under this umbrella, on both on the ops side and the developers side?
Yeah, that's a really great question, because Tanzu is about 3 years old, I think. And it was a formation of, some things we were doing internally as a company, acquisitions like Heptio, Wavefront, Pivotal, right? And so since all of those, there's been like new work that we've been doing too, right? And it's also, we're very active in the CNCF. And so that it's a lot, we're using a lot of open source, right? We contribute to it, as well as we are, commercializing some of those community projects into our products. So at the net, when you look at Tanzu, is what we're doing is we're building solutions for like these new platform teams, right? Platform engineering, platform operations teams that are setting up services for their application teams that are really anchored at the Kubernetes layer on up, right? So in that sense, there is the Tanzu application platform and Tanzu for Kubernetes operations. We also have something called Tanzu Application Service. That's really the renaming of the Pivotal Cloud Foundry stack. And we continue to invest in that. We have a lot of great customers running mission critical workloads there. Tanzu Application Platform is interesting in that it's taking the best of PaaS, but for what a end user wants to experience, but then building that for a Kubernetes centric world. Right, because that's really the defining like infrastructure API for us right now in this generation of software. So Tanzu application platform is, built on Kubernetes, right? It is also using, first-party open source that we've built, technologies we've built in open source, as well as, integrating with, other software out there. So that's really like one thing, and that's taking the, like we use Backstage, right, which is a very popular open source project for developer portals from Spotify. In there, we also have Tanzu Build Service, which is an automated build service that we built. Cartographer is a event-based supply chain orchestration project that we authored, and it's an open source project, but that's part of TAP, if you will. TAP is something that you install onto a Kubernetes cluster, and you get a portal, you get a application template catalog, you get an API catalog, you then get like a series of dashboards, you can build your supply chain and then see how it's progressing. So you can automate all of that in TAP. Tanzu for Kubernetes operations is really what we are building for the platform operator side, runtime and management. So in there it's a solution that's made up of our Kubernetes grid, which is our enterprise runtime, Kubernetes runtime. It includes mission control, which is the Kubernetes environment management layer. Service mesh, Tanzu service mesh, which is based on Istio, but we've also added more functionality on top. Our advanced load balancer, and then observability. I think I've got everything in there. But so as you can see in that is stuff we've built, as well as, commercializing some of the open source projects, and then some integrations around. So that's really those two bits. Tanzu application platform was just released in January of this year. And that is, so that's all new development that we've done. On the Tanzu for Kubernetes operations side, like, the grid, that's really like work packaging and other work that we've done of open source, with enterprise support. Mission control is something that we've written entirely ourselves. And then like, service mesh, Tanzu service mesh is Istio, but we've built additional functionality on top, like global namespace. And then, the observability is the Wavefront acquisition, and NSX load balancer is obviously, part of our VMware NSX group.
Yeah, older stack.
Mhm.
That's awesome. Thanks for sort of dividing those two high-level services under Tanzu, the TAP, and the Tanzu for Kubernetes ops. There is some little bit overlap there. Some services are in both places, but is it suffice to say, I'm hearing this time and again that Kubernetes is table stakes now. It's a settled battle, if you will, like, and everything you're building on top of that. Like I think everybody, all other vendors are doing the similar thing. That's how I see it. This is how is that how you see that, or is that different?
Yeah, I think that is similarly to how, you think like, before it was like you built everything to the machine layer, right? And then everybody built to a software layer because that's what virtualization did.
Yeah, virtualization.
Now we're in the phase of like the Kubernetes API, right? That is a construct that we all built to.
Yeah. So hypervisor was like obsolete after a while. You guys had a hypervisor advantage for a while, then that went away. Then you get another advantage, which is in this case Kubernetes, which is open source given by Google to the community. That usually that you run out of that advantage and other people catch on, and then you build on top of that. As you said, on Istio, you're building additional services, and I'm assuming that you're giving those additional services which you're building on top of Istio back to open source. Is that true, or is that your proprietary stuff?
So there's a lot that we do we do contribute back into upstream. Global namespace is something that is proprietary.
Oh, global namespace is proprietary.
Yeah, and so it's actually global namespace is kind of like it's a unique thing that we've built for multi-cloud type of environment. So the thing is you create this like virtual construct of an application in the global namespace. And what it allows you to do is have an app that is comprised of a bunch of services that sit potentially across multiple clouds. So you could have something in AWS, some parts in like, let's say Google, and then some parts on-prem. And then you're able to define the application behavior and the network and security policies within that namespace, even though it traverses different clouds. So it's kind of like another abstraction that you can have as a definition.
That's great. Actually, that's true multi-cloud in many ways. And on the multi-cloud side, you guys call it cross-cloud. I think most of the time you refer to this term as cross-cloud. So are there any specific services you guys are building, or is it because you have this contained environment at AWS, contained environment at Google Cloud and Azure? So because it's well contained, so it's very consistent from one cloud to another. Is that how it is? In other words, my question is how tightly integrated you are with AWS versus Google Cloud and Azure. I know you guys you have like almost like a native sort of integration on technical side with AWS, deeper sort of integration. I'm assuming that, actually I might be wrong. And on the other two clouds, Google and Microsoft Azure, it's not that deep of technical bindings, if you will. Is that true, or it's well-contained environment, doesn't matter, it's like a box, you pick it up from here to there, it doesn't matter where it is, it's similar?
So I think when you look at cross-cloud services, there's 5 services, and in those, like fundamentally, we're saying is like you as a customer, when you're looking at using more than one cloud, there are things that need to be like for better or worse, like a higher level of abstraction that you want to think that work consistently across multiple clouds. So there's the application platform side, which is where a lot of the Tanzu stuff fits in, right? In a cloud native application platform perspective, the how you build and how you deploy and manage those applications should be consistent regardless of the cloud that you're running in, those apps in. So in that sense, for us on the Tanzu side, like we've also said any cloud, any Kubernetes. So we're looking at that layer above. I think what you're talking about is really on our cloud and edge infrastructure side. So we look at the vSphere business and then the VMware Cloud, right? And VMware Cloud we have VMware Cloud on AWS, we have Azure VMware Solution, Google Cloud, VMware Engine, and there's another one on, there's also one for Oracle. In that, what you have is the VMware Cloud Foundations stack consistently in each of those providers.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's what that is. And so that is no different than if you were to think about AWS versus AWS Outpost, right? Same stack, but I want to run that consistently on-prem or in the cloud. So that's the cloud infrastructure side, where it's the infrastructure layer is consistent no matter where you're running.
So what's the name of that set of products? Is that under Tanzu or no?
No, that's under a different, that's the cloud infrastructure side of our business. And that's where it's VMware Cloud is the brand. Okay,
VMware Cloud as brand and Tanzu as brand. And what else is another? So these are the two pillars, or there's a third?
There's 5. Yeah.
5, okay.
So we have application platform, cross-cloud service, which is where Tanzu fits. We have the cloud and edge infrastructure, which is where VMware Cloud, vSphere type things fit, and our edge business technology. And then we have networking and security. And then we have cloud management, which is really where the ARIA portfolio. So whether it's so that you have a consistent way to manage apps and infrastructure regardless of where they're sitting.
Does anybody in VMware think that it needs to be simplified a little bit, the whole hierarchy?
I actually think this is you should have a chat with Vittorio if you haven't met him yet. He's I know him, but I haven't met him. I should do a dialogue with him, just like this one, and then pick his brain. All right, so that's good. Let's go. We're taking a little longer than what I thought. So now we have
sort of laid out the pieces, if you will, and where they fit in. How is the pricing done? Like, of course, we can't cover every pillar, these 5 pillars, and then 2 pillars under the cross cloud services, if you will, under Tanzu. Are you guys doing the pricing on pay per use? Is that pay, like, for example, you folks are trying to go to the left, to the developer side? Like, are there any services priced for developer per seat and stuff like that, or is it per core for
Yeah.
what?
Yeah. Great question. We're priced per core. And while these products are in service of the application teams, like developers, the value that we're bringing is that we're really helping companies who are trying to empower, the application, like development and delivery and management at scale. So like when you have multiple teams, you have multi-tenant, multi-cluster, multi-cloud environments. And so we find that the customers that we're working with, there really is a central team that's responsible for the platform, right? So they're making decisions on which cloud providers they're going to use, Kubernetes distros, their build pipeline stuff, all those kind of decisions. Those are still being made somewhat centrally. And then what they're doing is onboarding like multiple application teams. So in that sense, it's a per core. It's not something that is a individual developer is going to sign up with a credit card to use this. Because, you think about like supply chains, that's really something that someone's trying to centrally understand and control their security risk, right?
Yeah, I understand why it's being done that way actually, and I hope that you guys will launch some services which are pay per use, and or somebody can just use their credit card and start using your services. So it'll be much more appealing to the startups and smaller shops and maybe agencies and stuff like that. So
we welcome feedback. So folks, anybody who's listening to this that finds this some of the capabilities I talked about is very interesting, like we totally welcome feedback from potential customers or other users, and we always take that into account as we look at pricing, packaging, functionality, right?
Yeah, we'll put up your Twitter handle on next to your name once I produce this, so they can DM you the suggestions. Yeah, and then they can maybe give their 2 cents. Yes, definitely. I think the feedback loops are a very important part of running a 100%. Well-oiled machine, if you will, when it comes to developing software, especially. Yeah. So that's great. What else? Okay, let me. I had a high-level checklist here. Partnerships. That's one. And practitioners. Those two topics. We will touch upon that very very quickly because we are running out of time. Are there any deeper partnerships with cross cloud side of things? I know you guys have a lot of partnership for all other pillars at high level. Any new partnerships with the newer set of technologies you guys are putting out there? That's number one. Number two is the second question, we'll just lump it together, is that what VMware takes pride in is number of certified practitioners who are out there, right? When I used to work at VMware, we used to have I love VMware stickers, and people loved it because we had a mission back then. Our mission was to make the life of sysadmin easier. It was a very simple mission, and we did that actually pretty well, and that's why we were like loved actually, and during those years, and then gradually VMware accumulated a lot of other stuff, and then became a little heavier company, a lot of stuff, mainly focused on the ops side of things, right? So keeping that in mind, I understand why you have priced per core, because of this. You're still operating as like an ops kind of company, and that's how I see it. You might disagree with me, but okay. Going back to the partnerships on the newer set of technology side and the practitioner health, are you guys launching new certifications, and or how are you training new practitioners or the people who are just entering the tech, and how you're enticing them to go onto your stack, if you will. I usually say that to outcompete your competition, you have to out educate the market.
Yeah. Yeah, no, 100%. So a couple on the partnerships, VMware has a rich partner ecosystem from a route to market perspective, with various like infrastructure providers, et cetera. So we work with many of those same companies to provide Tanzu services through their kind of baked into their offerings, like the cloud providers. We have our Kubernetes grid as an option, kind of in their cloud environments, as well as partnerships with Dell and such, like the sovereign clouds, VMware, the VCPP network. Those are all available to us to provide more services, right? Because it's ultimately the same customer at the end, right? That we did work with on virtualization and infrastructure side. They're also looking to how do they add more services into their stack to provide their internal teams. So that's one that's from a availability perspective. From a technology perspective, absolutely. Specifically on the TAP side, something that we did just this summer was integrate that out of the box with like ECR and RDS, and we've built it as a quick start for EKS environments. So if you go to Amazon on their quick starts, you have the Tanzu application platform there, and it's already kind of set up to work natively with all the stuff available in the AWS ecosystem. We're also integrating to the likes of like Sneak, right, which is a very popular container scanning tool for the supply chains, and like Jenkins, right? Organizations with existing pipelines, they can just integrate that into the supply chains out of the box. So doing a lot there. We're really, I talked about any cloud, any Kubernetes, but behind that is really this idea of being modular, because customers have, at this point, a lot of these cloud native technologies some have been around longer than others. They've done some experimentation. They probably have one piece of at least one piece of the puzzle already in their environment. We're not asking them to throw it away, especially if they've operationalized it, but it's about like, how do we enhance, right? And help them connect the dots to have a more comprehensive solution. So that's on the partner side. On the practitioner side, I think this is a big one because I was just talking to some, technology executives last week in Barcelona, and they were like, when I think about workforce transformation, it wasn't about how do I enable folks to be more connected as we work in a hybrid work environment. It was, how do I upskill my existing team when this like Kubernetes and cloud stuff it evolves super fast, right? It's always changing, but then how do I upskill them fast enough and then also attract new talent? The skills gap is a real thing. And I think one of the analysts even recently talked about it being a skills crisis. We have a few things. So we have something called Cube Academy, which is a free website where we post our team, our team as well as folks in the community post content to just learn about Kubernetes. Because Kubernetes, if that's the disrupting thing and the thing the entire industry is building to, we really need to help people understand the nuances of that. And the details and how that architecture is structured. So that's a great place. We also have Tanzu Developer Center. So helping to teach developers about microservices patterns, all these other things related to modern app development. And that includes not only like blogs and videos, but also like these hands-on workshops that you can do. So self-paced workshops. So read, watch, and try. And then we also have a number of things for on the IT practitioner side. So there's a lot that we try to make available free in that sense, just available on the web. And then there's actual paid training and, that kind of learning stuff that we have from our learning team as well.
That's great, actually.
Doing a lot there.
That's a lot, actually. Just a quick question about the VMUG. I heard some news about it, or rumors about VMUG is resisting some of the change VMware is bringing. Is that just
Oh,
rumor?
I think
Or
that's a
like
rumor.
how are you guys working with the VMUG? VMUG is a very strong community, I know.
Yeah. Yeah.
How are they receiving these new services? Actually, let's put it that way.
We actually do a lot with VMUG, the Tanzu business. What we do is we make sure that the topics we bring to them are also in their context, right?
Mhm.
So we're not going to just show up with like, hey, build microservices, right? But what does Kubernetes mean to someone who's an infrastructure administrator?
Mhm.
If you are, we've done work to integrate the runtime into vSphere. So how can we show them how to instantiate that? What does it mean to have clusters? What does it mean? How do we help you understand how this can work in the environments that you are looking after today? So the Tanzu topics are a highly requested topic by the VMUG community. What we're really thoughtful about is making sure that it is shaped in a way that's really appropriate for their context and helps them, like, if I'm managing vSphere environments today, then what does that mean to add Kubernetes on top of that?
That's great. So great. Oh, I think with that, let me run down my list. So yeah, I think we have covered most of it.
A lot of things.
Wait, one thing actually, one thing you said you ship some things quarterly and some things are ongoing. The SaaS part of the portfolio, which is always getting improved, right? And then there's install the software you install, bits you install yourself. So there are two buckets. VMware still has those two buckets, right? It's not purely SaaS yet.
Yeah.
The question is around that roadmap. What's coming down the pike? Just if you cover like very briefly.
I mean, there's only so much I can actually say on
Yeah, I know,
roadmap being a
definitely. I
public
know the
company.
roadmaps can be.
Yeah, but what I can say is Tanzu application platform does ship quarterly. So you can expect something, some set of new features every quarter. I love that it's super iterative. And many of our other products do ship more frequently than it's not like just a 1-year cadence. Our next, we have Spring One online happening January 24th. 2023.
2023, yes.
Yeah. And so that's going to be the next time we kind of announce a bunch of new things. So really focusing there on the developer experience and what we're bringing to that across our portfolio. So if you haven't signed up for it, it's online and free. So you can go to spring1.io.
With that, Betty, thank you very much for joining me today and busting some myths and clarifying a lot of my questions. And sometimes I ask the questions on my viewers' behalf, and sometimes I ask very obvious things, which I might know, but they might not know. So thanks for your time and giving us all that information. With that, we're wrapping up here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Bye.